There are a lot of skills involved in making tongs. So while I know you signed up for a tong class, I would counter that this is so much more. I think a lot of smiths put off making tongs, kind of like forge welding. There's some mystique to it or some reluctance to really devote a lot of time to learning these skills. But once you jump in and start making tongs, you'll find that the fun things become more fun. And I say fun things, not that tongs aren't fun, but they're not what you're going to run up and show your mom. Like, look what I made, as you would some fun new bottle opener that you made. So work on the tongs. You're really forging to a specific set of parameters, and it puts you in charge of what the metal does. You become the one that dictates or determines what that piece of metal is going to change into. So keep that in mind as I go through these photos and videos to cover the process. Tongs are an essential blacksmithing tool. They are not a one-size-fits-all. They're made up of these three basic parts. The jaw, which you decide what it needs to be. So if you're working on a project and it's a particular size metal that you're working with, the jaw should be made to fit that. If it doesn't fit it, you're going to have a hard time holding on to that metal while it gets hot or as you're hitting it. So you have to have a good fit. The boss puts them together, and then the reins are also something that you decide how long you want them to be. If you're doing a lot of forge welding and you want to hold on to a particular size piece in the forge, the reins might want to be a little longer. If it's work you're just going to do at the anvil, maybe a little shorter. If they're scrolling tongs, maybe even shorter still, as you are going to use them to manipulate that metal in a certain way. So I'm showing you these particular tongs, not because they're the end-all be-all. Well, hello, doggy. But they are fully functional tongs. They may not be the prettiest tongs. I'm not in the business of making art tongs or selling them like, you know, John Williams or Dennis Dushek in our neck of the woods here. But they're fully functional. They worked great for my project. And I just wanted you to see that they don't have to be works of art. So I'm going to talk through forging the jaw, boss, and this rein transition, and then we're going to weld on, and I think you can even see the weld here on these tongs. We're going to weld on the reins and then put them all together. So let's get going. We're going to forge a flat jaw assembly. There are 3 main steps, and that'll get you the jaw here, the boss, and then this rein transition. So let's start with the jaw. You're going to be on the near side of your anvil. So the smith is on this side. This is 3/4 inch square. And you're going to make a mark on your anvil at the 1 3/16 measurement, 1 inch and 3/16. And yes, add that 3/16 is important. You want to measure from the outside of the anvil here, not the top of this rounded area. You do want to use a rounded area. As you forge these shoulders, it'll be important that it's on the rounded edge, or you could end up with cracks if you use too sharp of a section on your anvil. So set the shoulder and then begin to draw this down to look something like this. The ultimate goal is to have this 3/8 of an inch here. I like to give myself a little extra room at first, so we'll probably forge, not probably, I forge this down to a 1/2 inch. And as I refine the jaw assembly, I have room to get to that 3/8. Once I take it away, it's hard to put back, but I can always forge it down to the dimension I want later. So you see the rounded edge here, and then 3/8, and then this stretches out to about 1 inch, 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches, and it'll get about 1 inch wide. Let's watch that happen on a video. So we'll start by measuring from that outside edge to the 1 3/16 mark, and then start forging in that shoulder. And notice the angle on the material. Started out down here, but then as this jaw is being forged, it goes to horizontal. That's very important so that you can get this and keep this nice and straight. Notice that this is very even. There's no taper in this at this point. So here's where we were on the near side of the anvil. We have our jaw forged out. Now you're going to take it and turn it 1 turn. So this is the top turned 1 90-degree turn away from your hammer hand. In this case, the smith is right-handed and turned it 1 turn to the left, 1 turn away from that hammer hand. You're going to move to the off side of the anvil or the far side and swing the bar that you're holding on to away, again, away from the hammer hand, so that you end up with this roughly 45-degree angle and out about where this shoulder is. So this, since we're on a rounded edge, this, as you set the shoulder on this far side of the anvil, you're going to get some anvil creep. So what I mean by that is, if we set this down here, by the time I'm done, that shoulder is going to be about here on the metal, and that's where I want it. I want this shoulder, this rounded edge, to match up with the other rounded edge. So pulling it back just a little should get you there by the time you're done with the anvil creep that's going to happen over that rounded edge. Again, really make sure it's a rounded edge. Sharp edges will form little cracks or stress areas, which will only get worse as we go forward, and that is not what we want in the pair of tongs. It's also probably important to say that that creep that I'm talking about, where we start here and end up here, that will get more pronounced with a lower heat and a softer blow. So you do want to hit this solidly. You'll hit this shoulder and then form the boss. So here's a different angle. So here's here's our initial shoulder. Here's the shoulder we're creating now. And as you hit this, I don't want you to pay a whole lot of attention to the shoulder. You're going to hit that once, get it started so you have a good feel for where it is, but then really dig in the heel of your hammer so that this is parallel. You do not want a wedge here. These are going to match up with the other pair that you make, and the flatter and smoother this is, the more freely those tongs will move. So very important to dig in with the heel of the hammer as you're forging the boss. Don't worry about or correct for any growth and width at this point. You're going to have growth and width here and here. Don't worry about that at this point. You're just going to set this shoulder down dig in with the heel and get this nice parallel boss. So let's watch that happen in real time. We're going to start out with that initial shoulder, and you'll see this turn, 190-degree turn away from the hammer hand, and we'll have the top here, and then the top will turn to this side. Moving it away from the hammer, adjusting for the creep, hit that shoulder, and then really digging in with the heel of the hammer. So set the shoulder, but then the rest of the effort is spent digging in the heel. And you can even see that demarcation as that gets set there. And you would keep working. Don't want to be less than 3/8 of an inch. So again, I generally start with a 1/2 inch because I know I'm going to end up refining this later, and I will lose that 1/8 of an inch as I do that. So no need to get to your ending measurement too soon. So here's where we were. We set down our boss, and now you're going to stay on the off side of the anvil, turn 90 degrees away from your hammer hand. So in this case, one more turn to the left, and we're going to set in the rein transition. The reins transition is really nothing more than fullering in this area. And the important measurement is that you're going to push this out 7/8 of an inch. And the 7/8 of an inch isn't from this shoulder, it's from the inside shoulder, which we can't see from this view, but you'll have a good view of it later on in the presentation. So 7/8 of an inch from here to here. As you're working with these very specific measurements, it's a good opportunity to start training your eye to see these measurements. I'll use a visual aid or like a training wheel, and even go so far as to take a 1-inch bar that's marked to 7/8 of an inch, put it on the edge of my anvil with a magnet so that I can see that. And eventually you get to the point where you don't need those training wheels. Other things you can use to learn to sight up just how wide your material is are different parts of your anvil. For instance, your hardy hole, you'll know what that measurement is. So if that was 1 inch or 7/8 or 3/4, you can use that to start training your eye to see those different measurements. It never hurts to get out the ruler, but it can save you some time with that as you get more accurate in sighting what's 7/8 of an inch. So here we are. Oh, and this, we're on the off side of the anvil, and this is perpendicular to the anvil edge. We're no longer on a slant like we were with the boss creation. So straight on the anvil, and you're going to set in this fullering piece here. It's going to be very important that you continue to correct for width at this point with the boss, because we don't want this to have any kind of taper. And as you set this down, you're going to have, it's going to grow wider here and here. So continually going back to this step as you fuller that in is going to be important, and you'll see that happen in the video. The next question is, how far down do you want this to be forged at this point? And the answer is not much more than this. So here's our fullering mark. You're going to be tempted to start drawing down these reins, but it's really wasted effort at this point because we are going to weld on our reins. So That will save you a lot of hammer work. And since we're going to cut this off, don't get overzealous at this point and forge this too much farther back than this. So let's watch a video of the next step and the reins transition. So really digging in that heel, one turn away from your hammer hand, using the rounded edge of the hammer to fuller that in. And notice the angle of the material. It's up at about a 30-degree angle so that you end up with just that divot there. Take that down to about 9/16 and correct for growth frequently, keeping that boss nice and flat. At this stage, you're going to have something that looks like this. We've got our shoulder here, got our shoulder there, and a shoulder there. So this is the step we just got done creating. And now it's time to dress the boss. So pick this up you went from a 30-degree angle to a 45-degree angle, and you want to dress the front of the boss. So from this angle, you just pick up lightly on the far end, way over here, making this a 45-degree angle so that we can set this up against the anvil and dress the front of the boss. The hammer handle at this point should be vertical, straight up and down. In order to get that to happen, you're going to need to lean in with your hammer side leg, literally leaning up against the anvil so that your shoulder and your arm are over on the other side of the anvil. This is one of the only times where your elbow doesn't have to be at your side. The rest of the time you're hammering, your elbow should be at your side. But for this particular step, that whole arm should be over on this side so that that hammer can be held vertically. So this is nice and straight. The hammer straight, and then it ends up with a straight edge on this. The reason for this boss, which ends up, if we drew an imaginary line all through here and a line through here, the reason for this rhombus shape with this nice sharp edge is twofold. First, it's going to keep the reins from flying about wildly. I'm assuming most of you have had the experience where you're working with a pair of tongs, somehow that bottom rein gets dropped, and then you got to push up against it, either with your other hand or on your thigh, or you're somehow mucking about to get those reins back under control. That square corner will keep it's kind of a little break so that your tongs don't open as far. So it'll help you there. The other reason is this is a really good skill to learn. So it's more of an upsetting blow, and to upset on the far side of your anvil does take some practice. Here's your chance to practice. So once you have that hit a couple times, you're going to turn it all the way over. This is where we were hitting. You're going to turn this all the way over and dress the back side of the boss. None of this should happen quickly. You're going to cycle through these steps to dress the boss and be very aware of how your hammer is impacting this metal. Your hammer control is going to need to be pretty spot on, or you'll end up gouging these reins. So it's a good chance to practice that. You're also going to probably hit this a little lighter because you don't want to mess up your reins. So get this metal hotter, almost welding heat. Because if this is really hot, you'll avoid just deforming this area and truly forge this in just a little bit. We don't want to move this a whole lot. Our ultimate goal is to have this be 1 inch and this be 1 inch from each other. So lighter blows with this really hot, and you'll go from this step, turn it all the way around. So this is the area you were hitting. Now you're going to hit straight on the top to the back of the boss. And then one final move, just go from here and just lay it flat down on the anvil and some cycling blows to get that nice clean edge. By a cycling blow, what I mean by that is you're not hitting straight up and down. This is one of the few occasions, this and a square corner are one of the few occasions where a cycling blow is warranted. The rest of the time, if you are doing some sort of cycling blow, it's probably not helping your forging. You really want to be hitting straight up and down for every time, except when you're trying to get this edge. This also isn't a huge or a hard, heavy hit because we don't want to deform this. We want to keep this boss in check as best we can. It's especially important as you put this corner on that it's well supported down here. If you overforged here or tried to move through too quickly through these steps, this is going to end up getting really long and unsupported at this point. And that's a do-over. You get to start over. Go back to the second step and dress the width or growth in the boss so that you keep this all nice and parallel. These 3 steps from here, well, let me go back one more. Here to here to here should happen at least 2, maybe 3 times before your boss is done, and being very, very careful not to overwork it at this point. Slide is to show you that Anvil Creep that I was talking about. We've got our nice rounded edge. This was, so here was our first step where we laid off the jaw on the near side. This is the one where we moved to the off side and angled the piece away from the hammer hand. And we started here. But then as the shoulder got set in there, it went around that rounded edge of your anvil and ended up here. And that's what you want. You don't want this area to be too long or you're creating a weak spot, and you don't want it to be too short. You wouldn't want it in this area or you're going to end up doing a lot of filing to fit it together. And then as I mentioned, the measurements that we're going for are 1 inch here and 1 inch here, with this area being a 3/8 very even boss. Now, is it imperative that this be 1 inch by 1 inch? No, it's not imperative. What is imperative, that it's the same size as the other set that you're going to make so that they match up. Now, if they don't match up perfectly, that's okay too. You would start by putting the hole in the smaller one first, because the smaller one can work around the bigger one, but not the other way around. So as you practice this and you get better, you'll get closer and closer to that 1 inch mark, but don't give up on the tongs if it doesn't happen that way initially. The other point that I want to make is it's better to sacrifice this measurement than this 3/8 of an inch thick measurement. Keep these as thick as you can or as close as you can to that 3/8 inch, and be careful you don't overwork them. You could spend so much time dressing the boss that these end up a 1/4 inch or even thinner. So sacrifice this measurement to keep this thick. This would be, you know, a little bit more of the more important measurement. All right, so let's watch in real time as we dress the boss. So notice these aren't big, heavy hits, and not moving at more than about 1/8 of an inch and cycling through the steps very quickly. Don't try to overforge this too soon. Cycling through, we're crisping up the corners, and we're trying to get that to the right width, and we don't have a whole lot that we need to reduce it. So there you are. You got your nice sharp corners on either end, which will keep your reins in check and from swinging out wildly. And your rein transition is all ready. So what can go wrong and how do you prevent it?